Hello there, my name is Nadim, and for the past few years, and hopefully the future few years too, I've been running the Éireann Ó Tuathrain Living History Society. Now, we're based in the UK, roughly 6,000 kilometres away from Central Asia, but we do focus on Central Asian history, namely that of the Sogdians of the early medieval period. Now, the Sogdians were a civilization who lived on the Zarafshan and the Kashkadarya rivers in what's now Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, and they had a flourishing civilization between the 6th and the 8th centuries AD. Now, the Sogdians were famous as Silk Road merchants, but in reality, they were also everything else. They were artists, craftsmen, builders, horse herders, warriors, kings, and of course farmers. Everything you need to make an early medieval civilization run. And they had a couple of important cities. Now, you've all heard of Samarkand and Bukhara. They were around during the Sogdian period. And a few more cities as well. Kesh, which is probably near what's modern-day Shahrisabz, and Nakhshab. Of course, one of the most famous cities is a city called Penjikent, which is located in western Tajikistan. It's a fairly small city by Sogdian standards, but it's by far the most heavily excavated of all of them. Now, there's a ton of archaeology coming out of all of these sites, and along with the archaeology are some absolutely monumental wall paintings that decorated the houses, palaces, and temples of the Sogdians. These paintings give us a fantastic insight into the daily lives and the worldview of the Sogdians. And I saw the paintings and I just completely fell in love with the civilization. I really, really like their textiles, their arms and armor, and all of their stuff. I mean, look at this stuff. Isn't it neat? And that's why I'm here, dressed like this. So I'm mainly going to be talking about reenactment and its role in the promotion of cultural heritage, and especially focusing on reenactment of the early medieval Sogdian civilization. Okay, that's great, but what even is reenactment? Okay, so for those of us fairly unfamiliar with the idea of historical reenactment, and it's probably safe to assume that's most of you, because it's a very weird and very niche hobby. It's basically where folks like myself dress up in historical clothing and armor and accessories, and we play around with it. Now, on the surface, it might look similar to other forms of historical representation, like film or TV or video games, but in reality, they actually work quite differently. For starters, reenactment is a hobby, and it's run by volunteers who do it of their own free accord. Now, reenactment as a hobby really started in the 60s in the US with commemorations of the American Civil War, and over time it's spread across America and Europe. And at the moment, there's a pretty stunning variety in the range of historical periods depicted. In fact, you can probably pick any century between classical Greece and World War II, and chances are you'll find a reenactor doing it. Now, reenactors do this as a hobby, and so in our spare time, we like to research and reconstruct various aspects of the past, focusing on mainly on stuff we can wear, like costume, or arms and armor, or stuff we can play with, like weaponry and tools and games and those sorts of things. Now, the beating heart of any reenactment is the reenactment event, and this is where reenactors like to set up for a day or for a weekend, a lot of times aiming to experience life as it was in the past. They often also set up displays and exhibitions, and these are exhibitions of their replica objects and artifacts. And here visitors and members of the public can come have a look, come have a play, and come have a handle, and learn all about the particular area of the past that the reenactor is depicting. As I said, reenactors do this mainly in their own spare time, and there's a huge variety in the budgets, time constraints, personal motivations, and aims and objectives of reenactors, which gives us a big spectrum of quality. So, how does Central Asia fit into all this? Well, at the moment, in Europe at least, it kinda doesn't. In fact, Central Asian history is really, really underrepresented by reenactors. For the Sogdian period at least, there's nobody else doing it. It's just myself and my team who replicates them. Now, in the UK, the Sogdians are pretty much unknown, to be honest with you. If you asked an average guy on the street, and even your average reenactor or visitor coming to a reenactment event, what the Sogdians were or who they were, they would give you probably a pretty funny look. They've probably never heard of the word. And most people's conception of Central Asia is probably fairly vague as well. And this is precisely why reenactment can be such a powerful tool for cultural heritage promotion. Reenactment makes other cultures and other places relatable. Now, obviously there haven't been any events this year for obvious reasons, so I'm going to speak from my own experience from previous years. Now, my own display at a reenactment event usually involves a modest display of various replica Sogdian art pieces. I have ceramics, I have silverware, I have textiles, I have manuscripts, I'll even have some coins on, and some arms and armor, and of course the food. In fact, there's really nothing like the smell of freshly baked samsa and naan to really draw the crowds in. Now, as I mentioned before, most people visiting my display don't really have a strong idea of who the Sogdians were. So physically seeing all this stuff in front of them and having the chance to handle some of these replica objects can build a really powerful connection between the past and the modern day visitor. Coming face to face with a guy dressed like this and being able to have a go writing in Sogdian or handle some silverware or look at a manuscript, it really gives people a hands-on feel for who the Sogdians were and really gives people a hands-on feel for the heritage of Central Asia as a whole. Now, dressing up like this and talking to people dressed up like this gives the past a name, a face, a person, a body, and it makes it relatable and it makes it quite proximal as well. And a lot of times people like to relate their own experiences to what they're seeing in front of them. They like comparing Sogdian money to modern money and modern currency. They like trying out Sogdian handwriting with a reed pen on handmade paper and comparing it to writing in a biro in English on modern machine-made paper. And of course they like trying out the clothes and comparing it to what we wear today. And this sort of approach, I think, can really make people relate to and connect with cultures of the past from 6,000 kilometers away and 1,300 years ago. And as a result, it makes reenactment a perfect venue for promotion of cultural heritage and especially history education. This doesn't just apply to visitors who aren't reenactors, but also to other reenactors who are interested in the Sogdians. In fact, new members get the full Sogdian experience, minus the location, of course, but everything else is there. Now, unfortunately, at the moment, I'm fairly limited to events taking place in the UK. It takes a lot of car space to transport an entire medieval encampment. You would be surprised. In 2020, this hasn't really been much of an issue because there's not been any events happening for me to go to. But what this has done is it's pushed myself and a lot of other reenactors into creating more online content. Now, obviously, online content doesn't have that same sense of immersion for the visitor as real-life events do, but it still helps contextualize a lot of history and a lot of archaeology as living, working objects, usually designed with a function in mind, a function quite different from sitting behind museum glass. I'd certainly like to think that my own efforts and approach towards Sogdian reenactment has had some impact on the promotion of cultural heritage and history education of Central Asia. Not to mention, doing stuff online has got a much, much, much bigger reach than doing stuff face-to-face. Like, you can reach thousands and thousands of people online, whereas at an average reenactment event, maybe a few hundred, maybe 1,000 if you're lucky. So, where do we go from here? Okay, first off, I need to say this. Sogdian reenactment and Central Asian reenactment as a whole is really, really underrepresented. So, if you like this kind of fashion sense, if you like what I'm doing and you want to do it too, get in touch. Please get in touch. Here's my Twitter handle. Sogdian reenactment really started with me, and that was 5 years ago. Or at least in the UK it started with me, and that was 5 years ago. And it's hard to say how the field is going to progress. Certainly in the last 5 years, my approach towards historical accuracy and my overall goals have changed quite a lot. And I'm also a lot more interested in the promotion of general cultural heritage as well. Oftentimes looking at how Sogdiana compares with folklore and tradition in Central Asia nowadays, and often with more recent history of Central Asia too. I don't think the effect of, for want of a better word, ambassadors or representatives from a culture 1,300 years ago and 6,000 kilometers away can really be understated. There's something innately relatable about viewing history in foreign cultures through a person literally wearing the history on their body and handing it out for you to have a play with. And I certainly hope I've made a decent impact in the promotion of the cultural heritage of Central Asia. With that said, thank you very much. Feel free to get in touch, and thank you.